For the camera, yes, but everything else.
All right, let's get started. Before we start with Gary's presentation, I want to reintroduce Phil Rigdon and Secretary Butch Blazer.
So earlier today we discussed and talked about the MOU between the Intertribal Timber Council and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's more than just the Forest Service; it's actually the broader programs that include encompass the whole Forest Service. And so they brought some pretty fancy things for us to sign. The Secretary has already signed, and so let me find a pen. I got one somewhere, right here. And so, first of all, I want to, before we do the signing and everything, I do want to thank a lot of different folks, and Gary Morishima and Mark Phillips and a whole team of Jim Durgalo and the whole team of folks that helped work to put this together. I think it's a place where cooperation between the tribe and USDA and the Forest Service into how we work to meet the needs of our community and help meet the needs of what the Forest Service can bring to Indian country, and also what Indian country can contribute to the Forest Service. And it's a two-way street that I think is really important to what we're talking about. And so one thing I want to thank Butch for the time and effort that he's put into it, and also all of his staff that have put a lot of effort and time to make sure this happens. And so with that, I'm going to let Butch say a few things, and then we'll sign and take a few little pictures. So.
Thank you, Phil. And again, as I mentioned earlier when I was giving my presentation, I'm very excited about this MOU. Again, I think that the relationship that ITC has developed with the U.S. Forest Service over the years has resulted in some real positive work being accomplished. And so in seeing that, knowing again how big the U.S. Department of Agriculture is, and the Forest Service operates within that one mission area of the department, within the Natural Resource and Environment mission area. There's 6 other mission areas within USDA, and all of those mission areas have access to funding sources like the Farm Bill. And so we don't know what this is going to result in. We just know that it's going to be positive. And once those discussions start between the Intertribal Timber Council and those agencies within USDA, Katie bar the door, who knows what's going to happen. I just think it's going to be very, very exciting. And again, I applaud the Intertribal Timber Council for being so proactive, for staying with the idea, pushing me, making it a priority of mine. I tell you, I was hoping that we could get it to the point where the Secretary would sign it prior to this meeting. And as I mentioned earlier, that happened on Friday. And I got on the plane yesterday. And again, it's a good day. I'm very excited, as I know many of you are, especially the team that I worked with in putting this thing together. So thank you.
And one last thing, to make sure we thank Secretary Vilsack for signing it and giving this, and take his leadership and having Butch and the whole team working. We are truly grateful. So let me see. So what is today? The 4th? What is today? The 5th?
winding down. We got 2 more presentations to go. Well, the first one is going to be Gary Morishima. He's going to talk about ITC. ITC started 40 years ago, and he's going to talk a little bit about the reflections and some of the stuff that ITC's been doing for over 40 years. A little bit about Gary. Gary Morishima is a graduate of the University of Washington with a BS in mathematics and a PhD in quantum science and environmental management. From 1974 to present, Gary has served as the Natural Resource Management Technical Advisor for the President of the Quinault Indian Nation. From 1976 to date, he has served as an Executive Board Member for the Intertribal Timber Council. For the past 46 years, Gary has been the CEO for Moore Coal LLC, a firm specializing in natural resource management, computer simulation, statistical analysis. Gary is a current member of the U.S. Forest Service Tribal Relations Task Force and Implementation Team, the National Advisory Committee on Climate Change and Natural Resource Science, and the Fish and Wildlife Native American Policy Team. He is the U.S. Chair for several technical, he serves on the U.S. Chair for several technical committees of the Pacific Salmon Commission. Gary is a member and former chair of the Salmon Technical Team of the Pacific Fishery Management Council and a former member of the Salmon and Steelhead Advisory Commission for the U.S. Department of Commerce. Gary is a recipient of the Bowen Company's Pride and Excellence Award and the Earl Wilcox National Award for outstanding contributions to Indian forestry. So let's welcome Gary Morishima.
Well, trying to cover 40 years in 30 minutes or less, I think is quite a challenge. I'm very pleased to be here. I was one of the original founders of the Intertribal Timber Council. At one time, the Intertribal Timber Council was just sort of a twinkle in the eye. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history, some reflections of the past, the present, and what I see for the future. I entitled the presentation, Awesome at 40. And we'll see what happens from this point on. But a little bit about the past. I'm going to go back a few hundred years. But this was once Indian country, and that wasn't very long ago. And one of the things that was really interesting about how tribal peoples related to the land is something called ethnoecology. And it basically means that every culture adopted to the resources, the places, that were important to maintain their cultures and environments. A few hundred years ago, this was a land of plenty. And it wasn't just because of happenstance of nature. It was because the land and the environment had been shaped by tribal peoples. The forests, the prairies, the waters provided everything that was needed to sustain tribal cultures and economies. The medicines, the foods, buffalo, fish. But within a few years, something happened. And that was basically the imposition of European culture, European values, European science on the land. What happened within a few years? Well, the air and the waters were sick and getting sicker. We had certain species became endangered, so endangered that the United States enacted the Endangered Species Act in 1973. So the once blue marble that we've seen so many pictures of today became something new. We have a new blue planet, and it looks sort of like a trash bag that's exploding. When the Intertribal Timber Council was being formed, these were troubled times socially and politically. We were coming out of the Vietnam War. There were lots of protests going on. We had the occupation of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Wounded Knee. We had violence occurring on the campuses, Kent State. We had Martin Luther King raise issues of social justice. And 40 years ago, tribal activism was also at the forefront. This was a time of controversy, and it was a time when